other students of mine, adults, are thinking that they have to know how to draw perfectly before they can become a painter or a watercolorist. And when that's taken off of the table and I say, well, you can take a picture of a flower at Ober Gardens and then use a tracing app, trace it there, and then just focus on the painting part, I think it becomes a lot more approachable. So there were like Instagram lives where I was just teaching these really simple watercolor pieces, how to sketch it out and then how to paint it, because we were all stuck inside. And even today, a lot of the watercolor kits that I sell, a portion of that, I create watercolor kits that then I donate to the same chemotherapy center that my mom took treatments at in Neenah, Wisconsin. And it's just a way to kind of continue her legacy and to feel like I'm giving back and helping others to kind of use watercolors to calm their anxiety and to kind of just bring happiness, I guess, into a world that sometimes can feel a little too overwhelming. Hi, my name is Emily Marie Schroeder. I am a watercolor artist, Emily Marie Watercolors, and this is The Layered Onion. So this piece is one of my more recent watercolor pieces. They're prickly pear cacti. It was painted from a picture I took while living in Mexico. I lived in Mexico for 4 years. And it was a little town outside of Guadalajara, Jalisco, Mexico. And I just loved the colors. And so I decided I wanted to really test my skills and paint a larger piece out of it. So that's this one. All right, and this is another large piece that's recent, painted at the beginning of this year. And these are water lilies from a picture that a friend took at Cherokee Marsh. Here I was trying to work at really understanding reflections in water and getting the very soft edges of the reflections and then combining that with the really hard edges of the water lilies that are in focus. And then this piece is a picture that a different friend had taken from the UW Arboretum of their magnolia trees. And similar to the water lilies piece, I was also focusing on how can I play with in and out of focus with watercolors specifically, and using the soft edges of the background, specifically using a wet on wet technique to create those soft edges, and then pairing it with the hard edges of the magnolia flower that's in focus. Honestly, stress relief. I was very anxious during pandemic. Shortly after the pandemic hit, my mom was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer, and she was back in the US. And so in combination to pandemic and then my mom's recent diagnosis at the time, I just needed something to kind of quiet all of the external anxiety that was coming at me. And art really became that, and watercolors became that. And it was something new, and it was something that I felt like I could work at, and I could see my progress. And so it made me feel good. It helped relieve anxiety. And pretty quickly, it was something that I think friends and family also caught on to and saw that it was helping my own mental state. And then that's when I kind of started to teach a few online tutorials on my YouTube channel, just free stuff. I actually call them Mantra Mondays. So they were like Instagram lives where I was just teaching these really simple watercolor pieces, how to sketch it out and then how to paint it, because we were all stuck inside. And it had helped me so much. And I was just hoping that it could help other people. And my mom, going through chemo treatments at the time, she was one of them that tuned in almost every Monday. And it was a way to kind of keep us connected, even though we were very far apart. Mm-hmm. And it was something that helped. And it's something that even to this day, I think one of the reasons I continue with watercolors is because I do share that connection. My mom has passed since then.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. And watercolors has been kind of that bridge for both of us. I didn't know I was going to cry during this thing. Sorry.
You won't be the first one to laugh.
But so I do really feel a connection. And even today, a lot of the watercolor kits that I sell, a portion of that, I create watercolor kits that then I donate to the same chemotherapy center that my mom took treatments at in Neenah, Wisconsin. And it's just a way to kind of continue her legacy and to feel like I'm giving back and helping others to kind of use watercolors to calm their anxiety and to kind of just bring happiness, I guess, into a world that sometimes can feel a little too overwhelming. This is no, like, I never try to hide this from students, and hopefully like other artists out there are going to be like, you don't sketch your things out. I use a tracing app, and I like using a tracing app because I don't want to have to focus on that part of sketching my piece out. All the photographs are either my photographs or photographs that friends have allowed me to use. And so I'll use that tracing app to help me sketch things out onto my paper and then use the paints afterwards. So it's just it's a tool that I think helps me to kind of not spend so much time on that step. And it also helps me to kind of keep my prices lower, to be honest, because I'm not spending hours sketching out, for example, a dog that I'm painting. I'm not spending a ton of hours sketching out that dog before I paint it. And especially if you come from, I've always had this kind of perfectionist, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it 300%. And so sketching or tracing something out instead of sketching it, if I were to sketch it out, there's always going to be that eye that's just slightly tilted that I'm going to have to erase and redo 5 times. There's always going to be that one little section that is off. And so it's a way to kind of start with a really solid foundation. And then I still need to do the hard work of adding the paint and making sure that with the paint, it's looking good, but having that solid base and foundation really helps to alleviate some of that anxiety. And when I tell students that, I think it makes art a lot more approachable, where I think a lot of other students of mine, adults, are thinking that they have to know how to draw perfectly before they can become a painter or a watercolorist. And when that's taken off of the table and I say, well, you can take a picture of a flower at Obert Gardens and then use a tracing app, trace it there, and then just focus on the painting part, I think it becomes a lot more approachable and a lot less, it focuses on the de-stressing and kind of using art more therapeutically. And some people love the sketching part, but others just want the benefits of the color and painting, and tracing takes that out. We make jokes about it, about how they might not have seen watercolors since elementary school and the little yellow Crayola watercolor pans, and that's okay. As long as you know you have to add water to the watercolors, you're halfway there. And so most of the people are like pure beginners, haven't seen watercolors since elementary school. And that's also why my projects, I take the sketching out of it. And so all the projects are printed on the watercolor paper, because sketching things out and having an idea is honestly half of the battle when it comes to creating art. Mm-hmm. And so taking that out of the equation and just focusing on the relaxing part of being able to get the colors out and paint and see what you finish with, I think that makes it very low anxiety for a lot of people who want to start watercolors. Because as a teacher, I was an elementary school teacher, so I taught kindergarten, first grade, and third grade, so the younger of the elementary kids. And I think if I were to have been a high school teacher, maybe I would have thought about the process of teaching adults slightly differently than I do now. But all those same techniques that I used with my students back in the day of, the posters with the pictures and the words written out and a video of explaining what to do before students started it, all of that I'm bringing into my adult learning as a watercolor artist. And I think the way that has happened has allowed for people who've never taken any watercolor class before or any art classes before to feel confident when they're actually painting, and that it's not so much they're not trying to become like the next Picasso or the next Georgia O'Keeffe, but they're using art as a way to relax and to have fun, and it's not necessarily about, yes, it's about learning new skills, but it's not about pushing somebody to be, the best artist that they can be. It's all about just having fun and trying something new. And I feel like those are kind of that's the main group of people that I kind of, that's who I'm thinking about when I'm creating these classes, is people who maybe did art when they were a little kid, but when you become an adult and you have all these other responsibilities, work, family, taking care of a house, those things like art that we do to calm ourselves down and those hobbies, a lot of times we lose as adults. And so my classes, I'm trying to bring that back to working adults who just want to have fun and maybe learn a new hobby. And if they take a class of mine and they decide they don't like watercolors and they don't ever come back, that's great. But if they do and they decide that this is a hobby for them, and it's something that helps them throughout their day-to-day, and maybe they have a practice where they sit down and paint once a month or once a week. But that's kind of my goal, is to help those who maybe don't currently have an art practice. The amount of sun that we had there, the trips to the beaches, a lot of my beginning watercolors were focused around more tropical botanicals, things like cacti, but also monstera leaves, palm leaves, things like that. And so you do have that really bright vibrancy of green and blue, and it definitely could have had an effect even now on a lot of my watercolors. I also, some of those bright vibrancies, I think I can achieve them by not having too many layers in my work. There are some watercolor artists, I feel like, who try to add lots of layers to their watercolor pieces, and then they gradually build up the opacity through all of these different layers. And for me, I've really found a sweet spot of maybe 2, 3, 4 layers maximum. Otherwise, if you add more and more layers, sometimes that brightness of those colors just starts to dim a little bit. And then lastly, the color palette that I started working with back in pandemic, or shortly after I started with watercolors, I did invest in really high quality professional watercolors pretty shortly after I knew that this was something that I really wanted to continue doing. And I spent a long time really testing out a lot of the different colors and combining them and choosing colors specific to what I was drawn to. And a lot of those colors they're the same colors that I've worked with for the last 3-4 years. And so when you get this deep intimacy with those colors and you know exactly how they can be combined and which other colors are going to enhance the brilliance and which might dim the brilliance a little bit, I think it really helps to keep your pieces a little bit more vibrant and bright. When I think back to it, to be honest, I think it was Disney movies and Mickey Mouse, a lot of animation. I used to have like a pack of Mickey Mouse cards, playing cards, and with all the different Disney characters on it. And I used to sit, this was like 4th, 5th grade, and I would sit and I would sketch out those Disney characters. I don't know what drew it to me, but I just enjoyed sitting and sketching in my room, and it kind of grew from there. And I got really interested in middle school and high school, and that's kind of what led me to study in college.
And it wasn't watercolor?
No, it was. I did a few little, almost like weekend workshops with my aunt. She was living in Minnesota, and so I'd go there a few times, and so she showed me a little bit of watercolors. But in high school, I can't really remember a time that we really used watercolors in high school. It was a lot of oils. I mainly focused in oils and then charcoal pencil drawings. That was a scary moment. I knew that it was always in the back of my mind that maybe this is something that I could do full time. And it really took my mom's diagnosis to make me pull that trigger and say now is the time. I'm wanting to be back in the US with my mom. Teaching at the time, after 10 years of teaching in elementary school, had started to get, I was getting burned out, and I needed like this light from a lightness and, an excitement that watercolors was bringing me. And so I made the decision to leave teaching. It was mid-school year, which was also very challenging, but I knew that I just needed to get home. And leaving teaching, and then at first, watercolors and starting this business was kind of the excuse that I needed to leave teaching and to get back for my mom. And then shortly after that, I found that I could actually create a living out of being an artist, and combining my background as a teacher and teaching in-person classes, creating watercolor kits and doing custom portraits. And so it took a while to kind of make that decision, and it wasn't like I started to make a huge income right away as an artist by any means. But I look back and I really do see that my mom's diagnosis was kind of that push that I needed to, and I'm grateful for that, because my life would be very, very different if I was still a teacher. And she kind of encouraged me to try something new. And if it didn't work, I could always go back to teaching. There was nothing holding me back from going back to what I came from. But I wasn't gonna ever know if it was gonna work until I tried. You can find more information about my work, as well as classes and watercolor kits, on my website, emilymariewatercolors.com. My name is Emily Marie Schroeder. This has been The Layered Onion.